I'm at my wake, watching my lifeless body lie in state. Every fight that I fight is a waste. No one knows this grave. No one knows this mess I've made in the dark, because the dark is a cover that no one comes under, and nothing breaks through but you. You are light, so unrelentingly bright my eyes shudder, and I hear you mutter, "Wake up." Louder like thunder, "Wake up. It's a new day, son. Awake."
All right, good morning, everybody. Hey, it is a joy to be here with all of you today. My name is Taylor. I spoke here 2 weeks ago, so if you were not here, I didn't see you, and I'm bummed, but I'm glad you're here with us today. I am one of the leaders at junior high, but I am just blessed and thankful that I get to speak here during this transition period in NineTen. So, with that said, we've been in a series in the book of James, so I hope that you are already there, okay? I hope that you come and you're like, I know we're going to be in James because that's the series we're in, but if not, you can flip over, find James chapter 2. I'm going to be starting in, verse 14, I believe? James 2, chapter 14. As you're flipping there, I want to pray for us, and we'll get started. Father, I just thank you for every single person that came here to church today. I pray that you speak to each person individually, that we can all leave here knowing our next step that you are calling us to do in our faith. It's your name we pray. Amen. All right, so I want to start off with a story that I know I've told before at some point, so maybe you have heard it, but you've heard a bunch of stories, so maybe you forgot. But when I graduated high school, our whole friend group decided that we were going to go on a camping trip every summer for like the rest of our lives. Okay, this happened like 4 summers and then like we don't really talk anymore, but that's pleasant. So we decided we're gonna do this, and we were thinking because it was like, oh, now we're out of like youth groups, and now we're never gonna go on like a camp again, so we thought we need to create our own camp experience. So about like 15 of our friends and 2 of the small group leaders in 11, 12 at the time came with us, and we went to a place that is called Kern River. Okay, I don't know if anyone's heard of Kern, if you've ever camped at Kern before, but we had a lot of fun. It's probably about like 4 to 5 hours away from here, and it was super hot trip. That was the bummer, but it was cool being like 17, 18 years old, barely any adults there, just enjoying nature. And we decided to go on this one hike while we were up there. We heard that there was this waterfall that was unbelievable, it was beautiful, so we're like, we have to find this waterfall. But we're young, we don't really know where anything is, so we're like, let's just go wandering. We heard it's this way. So I remember we're just like walking on the roads, we're walking on trails, we're just walking wherever. We can't find this waterfall. Probably about like 45 minutes to an hour in of walking, we come across a ranger station. So we're like, yes, the rangers will be able to tell us where to go. So we go and we ask the ranger, hey, we are looking for this huge, awesome waterfall. I assume that you've heard of it. Do you know where this waterfall is? And that is when the ranger told us, yeah, I do know what waterfall you're talking about. However, I'm not allowed to tell you where that's at because we've had a lot of people get hurt there and someone actually died recently. So we hear that information. That sounds dangerous, but we still got to find this waterfall, right? So we're like, all right, thanks, ranger, for nothing. But we kept looking, trying to find this. Finally, we find this waterfall probably another like 30 minutes into the hike, and it is beautiful. There's this like water pool down below that we can go swim in, and there's a spot though where you can kind of walk up to the top. And every friend group has that friend that is like the dumb one in the group, right? Like they're the irresponsible one, I guess I should say. Not dumb, but they're very irresponsible. They do risky things. I don't know if you're looking at the person in the room right now, but our friend was the one that decided to not just walk up the top to kind of look over. He decided to get to like the very top of the waterfall, like in the water where it's going down. And he looks down, and all of us are yelling at him, like, what are you doing? Are you an idiot? And he doesn't hear us at all. And he keeps looking, and he keeps looking, and all of us down below are like, our friend is about to die, and our parents are never going to let us camp again. We were hoping to camp the rest of our lives, but now we won't be able to do it. And he looks over, and we're yelling at him, and then he slips, and he falls down the waterfall. Now, in that moment, like I swear to you, I never thought I would see someone die. I thought I was watching my friend die in that moment. Luckily, he did not die. And luckily, he did not fall all the way to the bottom. There was a small little pool of water that caught him about like 4 feet down. So he landed in that. He wasn't like hurt at all. And like he got up and he walked down toward us, and we're all like upset with him, but we're like thankful that he is alive. To be honest with you, he'd probably be mad that I'm telling you this story because I bring it up all the time. He's like, that's not what happened. I didn't almost die. But all of us are like, yes, you almost did die. Now, I was thinking of that story in preparation for James chapter 2 today, because when we went to the ranger station, the ranger gave us a warning. The warning was, danger is ahead. Stop going down the path that you are currently going. Turn back, go back to camp. Don't keep trying to find this waterfall. Now, there's a warning that is found in James chapter 2 today for all of us in this room, that if you continue along the path of your understanding of faith, there could be danger ahead. You could write it down this way. Throw up the slide, please. Path of danger is this. Faith is about what I intellectually believe about God. There's a path of danger that if you believe that faith is about what I intellectually believe, James is here to say, whoa, danger. Stop going down that path. And we're going to discover that today when we read James chapter 2. Now, when I talk about intellectually believing things about God, I mean believing in the Bible. And I mean believing that Jesus died and he rose and he resurrected and all of those things. Those are intellectual. Those are facts. And James is going to say, be careful if that's what you think faith is all about. So we're here in James chapter 2, starting in verse 14. It says, what good is it, dear brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith, but don't show it by your actions? Can that kind of faith save anyone? Suppose you see a brother or a sister who has no food or clothing, and you say, goodbye, and have a good day, stay warm and eat well, but then you don't give that person any food or clothing. What good does that do? So you see, faith by itself isn't enough unless it produces good deeds. It is dead and it is useless. Now, we're going to read 2 warnings that James gives us about intellectual faith. And the first one is this. Intellectual faith can become useless. Intellectual faith can become very, very useless. No point. I was thinking of some things that were useless this week, and I just Googled like useless items or useless things. So there's some pictures of some useless things I found. On the left, obviously there's no point of watering your water can, so there's no need for that. That hammer, I guess technically is useful to like pull a nail out, but for the primary purpose of hitting a nail in, that does nothing. And over there, like a fork that you can't even like put a lot of pressure on, that serves no purpose. There's one other thing that is useless. You guys might disagree, but throw it on up there. It's just cheese, you know, because cheese is like the worst thing out there, and it's disgusting. If you know anything about me, you know that I hate cheese, and it's just so useless. All right, so there's no point in cheese in the world. Let's just get rid of cheese. You see, there are things in life that are useless. If you have an intellectual faith about Jesus and about God, and if it just stops right there, it can become useless, and that's what James is trying to argue. He's saying, if you believe that we should be good to people and treat people well, but you just see someone that is in need and you say, have a good day, and just keep walking by, what was the point of your faith? Because our faith is there to help other people out. There's a pastor, he said this, don't pray for God to feed your neighbor when you have plenty of food. And then another pastor said, don't pray for God to feed the hungry unless you're willing to go feed them yourself. Sometimes we see people in need and we just pray for them, which prayer is powerful, but what if you were the answer to the prayer and you just walked on by? You see, if you say that you have faith in God, don't let it just stop with an intellectual belief, because then it's kind of useless. If we're meant to make this world a better place, if you're meant to be salt and light, but you don't do anything, what's the point? He's about to give us another warning. Let's continue reading. Verse 18. Now someone may argue, some people have faith, others have good deeds, But I say, how can you show me your faith if you don't have good deeds? I will show you my faith by my deeds. We kind of just talked about that. Here's the next warning. You say you have faith, for you believe that there is one God. Good for you. Even the demons believe this, and they tremble in terror. How foolish. Can't you see that faith without good deeds is useless? See, the second warning that he gives us is this. Intellectual faith can become demonic. Intellectual faith can actually become demonic. He brings up the spiritual realm here. The reality is the Bible speaks to the truth of an unseen world of demons and of Satan and how they hate God, but they can't go after him because he's powerful. So they go after his kids, and I don't necessarily mean in this take over your body sense, but oftentimes through temptation and just trying to get you to do things that you don't want to do. He's saying, those demons that are against us, if it's all about intellectual faith, well, they have that too. And wouldn't you argue in this room that we should have more faith than a demon has? The crazy thing is that it can be hard for us to believe everything about God because we can't see him. But demons in an unseen world, in this unseen realm for us, they've seen, they know. They believe that Jesus is real. They believe that Jesus died on the cross. They believe that there's only one God. You see, the demons believe all of this. So if you say, I'm a Christian because I believe there is one God, I say, so does the demon. If you say, I'm a Christian because I believe that Jesus is real, I would say, so does the demon. If you say, I'm a Christian because I believe that Jesus rose from the dead, I would say, so does the demon. So what's the difference there? And that's what he's going to continue to explore here. Before I read the rest of James, I do want to take a quick sidebar, and I want to read to you a verse that is in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, that relates back to the useless point and the demonic point when it comes to knowledge about our faith. Because getting into heaven is not about knowing so much about God. Because if that's what it took to get into heaven, more demons would probably get in because they would probably pass the test more than you. But there's a verse in Matthew chapter 7 I want to read to you. If you can throw that up. It says, not everyone who calls out to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who actually do the will of my Father in heaven will enter. I want to focus on the words Lord, Lord. You see, right here, the right words are being used, right? Like they're referring to God as Lord, that's who he is. And the right theology is being referenced because they understand that he is the only true God. But this verse is saying it's not about saying the right words, and it's not about having the right theology, but it goes deeper than that. Do we actually have faith and trust the things that God is asking us to do? So, James is now going to give a couple of examples. Let's continue reading here in James chapter 2, verse 21. It says, don't you remember that our ancestor Abraham was shown to be right with God by his actions when he offered his son Isaac on the altar? You see, his faith and his actions work together. His actions made his faith complete. And so it happened just as the scriptures say. Abraham believed God, and God counted him as righteous because of his faith. He was even called the friend of God. So you see, we are shown to be right with God by what we do, not by faith alone. What he does here is he references Abraham and Isaac. It's a story that you may be familiar with if you grew up in church, but I know not everyone has. So for the sake of biblical literacy, I want you to actually see this verse, or this story. So if you can just save a spot somewhere in James, but flip over to the book of Genesis and go to chapter 22. Real briefly, I just want to read to you the story of faith that we see modeled in Abraham. As I said, you may be familiar, but it's still good to go back and read passages and stories that we are familiar with. Genesis chapter 22. And we're going to start in verse 1. We're just going to read probably 14 of the verses. But we won't spend forever here. All right. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. 22. Sorry, did I say 2? 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham's faith. Abraham, God called. Yes, he replied, here I am. Which, that is the person of faith. Then when God calls upon you, you say, here I am. I'm willing to do what you ask me to do. Take your son, your only son, yes, Isaac, whom you love so much, and go to the land of Moriah. Go and sacrifice him as a burnt offering on one of the mountains, which I will show you. As we read this, I want you to see the parallels between Isaac's sacrifice and Jesus' sacrifice. You see, he calls upon Abraham. He says, take your son that you love. He will be sacrificed on a hill. Think of God, think of Jesus. Now it says the next morning, Abraham got up early. He saddled his donkey and took 2 of his servants with him, along with his son Isaac. Then he chopped wood for a fire for a burnt offering, and he set out for the place of God, or for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day of their journey, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. Stay here with the donkey, Abraham told the servants. The boy and I will travel a little farther. We will worship there, and then we will come right back. Some of you are like, what the heck? This guy is actually willing to go and sacrifice his son? Well, in this passage, we see that he believed that God would resurrect his son, because he says, we're going to go up, and we are going to come back down. Verse 6. So Abraham placed the wood for the burnt offering on Isaac's shoulders. Does this remind you of anything? Isaac, the son, with wood on his shoulders, walking up a mountain. Doesn't it remind you of Jesus, the cross on his back, walking up toward his death? While he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them walked on together, Isaac turned to Abraham and said, Father? Yes, my son, Abraham replied. We have the fire and the wood, the boy said, but where is the sheep for the burnt offering? As we continue to read this, keep in mind, Isaac is probably anywhere from like 13 to 17 years old. He's not this little kid that is just like doing whatever his father asks. Yes, he is obeying him, but he has an understanding as a teenager. God will provide a sheep for the burnt offering, my son, Abraham answered, and they both walked on together. When they arrived at the place where God had told him to go, Abraham built an altar and arranged the wood on it. Then he tied his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. And Abraham picked up the knife to kill his son as a sacrifice. At that moment, the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham! Yes, Abraham replied, here I am. Don't lay a hand on the boy, the angel said. Do not hurt him in any way, for now I know that you truly fear God. You have not withheld from me even your son, your only son. Then Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught by its horns in a thicket. So he took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering in the place of his son. Abraham named the place Yahweh Yireh, which means the Lord will provide. To this day, people still use that name as a proverb, on the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. You see, Isaac being, I just said like 13 to 16, he could have even been older than that. The point is that he willingly laid himself down on the altar, just like Jesus willingly sacrificed himself. We know that Jesus is always the greater whoever. Jesus is the greater Abraham, or greater Isaac in the story. And we see that he would be sacrificed. Isaac here was not sacrificed. But what I want to draw your attention to is this point that James is trying to make. If you can throw it up on the screen. 2 lessons about real faith. Abraham's example shows us that if we have faith in God, we will do what he tells us to do. That if we have faith in God, we will do what he tells us to do, no matter what it is. God appeared before Abraham. He's never done this again, but he said, take your son, sacrifice him up on a mountain. It's a crazy thing. And even a crazy thing, Abraham, a man of faith, said, here I am, I'll do it. God will ask you to do crazy things, and people of faith respond. They say yes because they know that saying yes to Jesus is always the best option. I truly do not believe that God's ever going to appear before you if you have kids someday and say, sacrifice your kid. But I do believe that he will ask you in your context, in your life, to do crazy things. And a person of faith says yes. I think back to when I was in high school, crazy things that God asked me to do was to confess sin. It's like, what? No. When I mess up, when I do something embarrassing, I keep that inside. I don't let other people know about that. But I felt God saying, that's what you do. In small group, you open up. I know another crazy thing that the Lord asked me to do was just to reach out to people that didn't have many friends at school. And to acknowledge them, and to sit with them, and to talk with them. Right now, that doesn't seem so crazy because a lot of my life has been to like look for people that don't feel as though they're comfortable somewhere and just helping them feel comfortable at church. But in high school, it's like, what? No, I'm here to like hang out with all my friends. I'm not here to like leave my friends to go hang out with other people that don't have many friends. But that was the crazy thing that God was asking me. I don't know what crazy thing God is going to ask of you, but it could be some of those examples I just gave. Crazy things could be avoid materialism. Like that's what so many of us are about. Is like pursuing stuff, and we place so much importance on stuff. But that could be the crazy thing. For some of you, it could just be it is, to remain sexually pure. And that's the crazy thing in a culture where it's like, no, that's not what everyone else is doing, but that's the call in your life. You see, there are so many things that in your context, God is asking you to do that is crazy, but people will face say yes. Now, James is going to go on, he's going to give another example. We're not going to read this whole story for the sake of time, but, let me go over to James. James 2. Verse 25. He says, Rahab the prostitute is another example. She was shown to be right with God by her actions when she hid those messengers and sent them safely away by a different road. Just as the body is dead without breath, so also faith is dead without good works. So what James is doing is he appeals to the Jews first with bringing up Abraham, and then he appeals to the Gentiles afterward by bringing up Rahab. And he tells the story about, found in Joshua chapter 2, if you want to go read it later this week, where Joshua sends some men into the promised land. They go to a place called Jericho, and they're supposed to scout out the land. And the people of Jericho, they're on high alert. They know that there's spies there. So these people go to Rahab the prostitute's house. Now, the Bible never insinuates that they go to a prostitute's house for anything inappropriate, but it actually was probably a wise move to do because there's always men going to the prostitute's house, so people might not think it would be suspicious. So they go into the prostitute's house, and while they're in there, some men of Jericho, they come knock on the door, and they're looking for these spies. And what Rahab does is she lies, and she says that they aren't here. And in doing so, she is protecting the Israelite men. She's protecting them because they could have been killed if they were found out. So that's the story that James is referencing, and here's the point that he's trying to get across. Throw it up on the screen. Rahab's example shows us that if we have faith in God, we will love other people even if it costs us something. That we will love other people even if it costs us something. Do you realize that his example of James and Rahab goes back to the most important commands? Love God, and then love other people. Even when it costs you something. It could have cost Rahab her life. But she said, or she showed love. And that's what real faith is about. He's saying it's not about an intellectual belief. It's about loving God through obedience, and it's about loving other people even when it costs you something. And guys, can I tell you that I've had the greatest example of that in my life? Working for Travis for 11 years, that man is the most sacrificial man I know. Just last Wednesday, I went down to a water polo game with him, and he bought me Starbucks on the way down, he paid for my ticket to watch the game, and then he paid for my In-N-Out after. Why? Because he loves me. Because he's awesome. It cost him something. It didn't cost him like his life potentially like Rahab's, but it cost him his money, right? Because that's what love is. So let me challenge you, as you are a person of faith, love people with the understanding it's going to cost you something. I doubt any of you are going to be killed for your faith, but your reputation could be killed. Your popularity with certain groups of people could be killed. Why? Well, what if you're called to reach out to people at school that no one talks to, and you show them love? It's going to cost you something. James is going back. It's not about an intellectual faith. It's about showing that you believe through your love toward God and toward others. Now, I want to give you real quickly, as we start to wrap up, a warning, though, about good works. Because you might be like, well, I thought it's just faith in Jesus, believing that he died for us, that gets us into heaven. It's not about doing things. And the reality is, it's not about our good work. It's about God's good works on the cross. And because of that, now we can enter heaven. However, if we truly believe in his good work on the cross, there's going to be examples of good life or good works in our own life. However, it can get to the point where you think, because I go to church, because I never cuss, because I don't talk bad about people, because I have all Christian friends, now I'm going to get into heaven. And I talked about this in junior high, if you were there recently, or when you were there last year. I said that that's not what gets you into heaven. That's what makes you self-righteous. You just thinking that you're such a good person. Look at me. I have perfect attendance. Now I get into heaven. That's not what James is trying to argue here. He's still telling us the reason you get into heaven is because of God's good works. However, if you truly believe in that good work, there will be evidence in your life through your action. So be careful. Don't hold on to good works and I'm such a good person, because that's not what the gospel is about. The gospel is about you being a bad person, but because of Jesus, now you take on his righteousness and you're a good person solely because of him. That's what it's all about. So to wrap everything up, I have some closing questions that you can write down, and I would encourage you to talk about these in life group on Wednesday night. So first question is this. Is your faith demonic, or is it doing the things God asks of you? I don't think anyone would want to say, yes, I have a demonic faith. But if you just believe the things of God but don't do the things of God, you're closer to a demon than you are people of God. So that's the first question for you. Is your faith demonic? I'm not calling you a demon, okay? But is your faith like, can I identify with the demon, or can I identify with the people of God that actually trust and do the things he's asking you to do? Now, the next question is similar, just a little more specific. It's this. Can you provide one example of recent obedience? Can you provide one example of recent obedience? I think this is an incredible question to ask in life group. Could be a convicting one. You might say, yeah, I was nice to a person in first grade. Like, well, recent is a key word in there. What has God asked you to do recently? Can you identify that, and can you tell other people? Because that's proof that you're doing the things that God asked of you. And then lastly, who is God currently putting on your heart to love? This goes back to the Rahab example. Yes, we're called to love everybody, but let me challenge you to love somebody. And who is God currently putting on your heart right now to show love to? It will cost you something. But that's what the Christian life, that's what faith is about. James chapter 2. Don't just have intellectual faith. Prove that you believe in God. So Father, give us the courage this week to do the things that you are asking us to do. It's in your name we pray.